What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and I'm currently at home playing Dodge the Hurricane. I am right in the path of Hurricane Matthew, Category 4 storm. There's like a 99.9% chance my power is gonna go out, so I'm gonna try to get this video up before then, but if it doesn't, then, well, you know why it came out a couple of days later than it was supposed to. So this week, I've been working on the second case for greatest of all time. As you might guess from watching the first one, if you didn't, by the way, click on the annotation. You might be able to guess those take a while to put together and do correctly, and while I was in the middle of doing that, I actually got another idea I didn't really need to write notes on, so I wanted to present that video, and it's what you're watching now, which is 3 of the biggest what ifs in NBA history. Now, what if is pretty much an NBA fan's favorite term. It allows us to pretty much imagine and dream up a lot of things we didn't get to see, what would have happened in an alternate timeline if a player got traded here or this player didn't get hurt, and I often think about 3 specific ones I want to share with you guys, and I'm going to tell you why I think about them a lot and pretty much why they are 3 of the biggest what ifs in NBA history. Number 3, Kobe and Shaq. Now, this scenario has probably been talked about a million times. As we all know, Kobe and Shaq played a total of 8 seasons together, which was really more like 6 because it was about Kobe's 3rd season before things really started to click and he broke out averaging about 20 points. That's when he really became the budding star that we pretty much know and love today. And they did some pretty amazing things as a duo in their time together. When you look at that total of 8 seasons they played together, they scored a total of 26,110 points as a duo, just them two. They won 3 championships, which was a 3-peat, and in one of those championships, they were the only team in history to go 15-1 in the playoffs, which is a record that still stands today. And as we all know, if Allen Iverson hadn't had that ridiculous Game 1 explosion, they could have very well went 16-0 in the playoffs. That's pretty crazy to think about. What's even crazier than that to think about is just the force that these 2 players were individually and the fact that they were playing on the same team. So on one hand, you had Kobe Bryant, who was drawing comparisons and still does today comparisons to Michael Jordan. 2nd greatest shooting guard of all time is what people pretty much think about him. Ridiculous, especially in his young days when he was very athletic and could play way above the rim. And you basically did not have a great way to stay in front of him and slow him down. But the craziest thing is that he was playing with Shaquille O'Neal, who is widely regarded as the most dominant force in NBA history. Now, whether you think it's him or Wilt Chamberlain, that's up for debate. We'll get to that in another video eventually. But there's no question that when you talk about physical anomalies in the NBA, you pretty much think of Wilt Chamberlain and Shaquille O'Neal. At a height of 7 feet tall and about 300 plus pounds, you really couldn't move him, especially because a lot of the extra body fat he carried on. Yes, that worked negatively against his stamina, but it made him hella hard to move or, basically try to stop from pushing you under the basket. On top of his size, he could really use that effectively to average about 30 points and 14 rebounds. And when you think about the fact that somebody had to craft a defense to deal with Shaquille O'Neal down low, but then also deal with Kobe Bryant out on the wing, that's pretty unthinkable. You get the point with that by now. Now, the reason that they make my list of one of the biggest what-ifs in NBA history is because they broke up over so much nonsense. There was absolutely no reason this duo really shouldn't have played their entire career together. And they let so much little things get in the way of what they really could have done to the game of basketball. You talk about them being completely different players with different philosophies, so we already know Kobe Bryant is a workaholic, obsessive, and Shaquille O'Neal just kind of depended on his natural God-given size to do what he did. He didn't work as hard in practice, admittedly. There was a lot of egos going on there, and there was a whole lot of people saying things they probably shouldn't have said. But here's the thing, when Kobe and Shaq broke up, they were both still kicking it at a really high level. So you talk about Shaquille O'Neal at that point still averaging 21 points, 11 rebounds, still being able to put this all up on about 60% field goal percentage, it looks like. And then you talk about Kobe Bryant, who his game really elevated after Shaq left. As you saw, he put about 35 points up in a season one time. That was just a crazy season, the thing he was doing in the 06 year. And Kobe Bryant actually stayed as a top player in the NBA until about the year 2013, where Father Time just decided that was enough. You've been dominating this game too long. His Achilles gave out on him, and Kobe Bryant that was pretty much the end of Kobe right there. I consider 2013 the end for Kobe. Kobe was still putting up 27 points a game at the age of 34, and it's hard not to think he would have been a top player for some time after that without injuries. But here's the thing that's interesting. When you look at Shaq's page, he was producing at a level that would have been able to help Kobe Bryant win championships until probably about 2008-2009 season. And the 09 season is where he was averaging 17.8 points a game with about 8 rebounds. After that, he went to Cleveland and it totally fell off. But you have to think, Shaq playing for LA until 09, the fact that it's Los Angeles, the fact that it's still Shaq and Kobe, they could have surrounded that team with enough talent to where they probably would have still been, I'm not going to say they would have won a championship every year after that, because it was clear in 04 that there were some things going on there. Maybe they wouldn't have even made the finals every single year, but for that 5 seasons, that's a window. That's a 5-season window Kobe and Shaq could have won more championships in. I do realize that Shaquille O'Neal did pick up some injuries in Miami, which really kind of derailed his time there after the championship, but again, that has all to do with the butterfly effect. Who knows if that happens if he stays in Los Angeles, and if that doesn't happen, like I said, that production is enough to at least give them a chance at a championship every year until about 09, then it probably would have ended there. So it also gets you thinking what would have happened in the East, because at that time the Pistons were basically going to the Eastern Conference Finals every year. If Miami never picks up Shaquille O'Neal, then do the Pistons make it every year up until LeBron James finally beats them? And you know, that's just part of the what if scenario. Shaq doesn't go to Miami, the power doesn't shift the way it does. Huge what if thing there, and we're gonna have to wonder what Kobe and Shaq could have done for that next 5 years, pretty much forever now. Number 2, Kevin Garnett in Boston. Now, this one hurts my soul as a Celtics fan, and because I feel like we're the only people that really ever think about this. Kevin Garnett just retired, as we all know, and we've been looking back at his career. And the thing is, I noticed people acknowledging all the great things he did, and won MVP, won a championship, but one thing that for some reason I don't feel gets talked about a lot is how much better Boston should have been, and the reason why they didn't ever actually reach their potential. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So when Kevin Garnett came to Boston, we all knew that first championship was coming. We went 66-16, beat the Los Angeles Lakers 4-2, really destroyed them in Game 6, and people were happy because for the first time, Kevin Garnett finally seemed to be on a team where he could compete. He was competing before that on the Timberwolves very early on, but for a while after that, they were basically just missing the playoffs, and years were just falling off of Kevin Garnett's prime. So now that he finally had the team, we were killing it, and if you really want to see what we were doing, here's something I never see mentioned. You know how the Warriors were 27-1 before the Christmas game, which they kept winning actually. I just say that because the Celtics were 27-2 at that same point in the season on December 23rd, 2008. We went on a pretty, not a losing streak, but we started losing more games after that, so we wouldn't have actually won 73 games. But that shows you at that point in the season, we were doing Golden State Warrior type stuff back in 2008. Back then, going 73-9 wasn't really even on the table. We were just trying to be repeat champions. And we were well on our way to doing that, because the East really had not changed since we had just won the championship. There was still LeBron James trying to make the NBA Finals, there were still the Pistons, who didn't even have Ben Wallace at this point, and there was the Orlando Magic, who had gotten a little bit better, but I don't think they would have beaten us healthy. Here's the thing that sucks. It was made for us to go back to the championship, but on February 19th, everything changed. Kevin Garnett had a knee injury on probably the most innocent landing I've ever seen. He tried to come back for like 4 more games later that season, but we ended up shutting him down and we replaced him with Glenn Big Baby Davis. And the Boston Celtics were never as good as the 2008 squad we had after that. I kept up with the Celtics pretty religiously after that season, and the thing I noticed is that even when Kevin Garnett came back, he just was not the same Kevin Garnett. You look at his numbers before the injuries, he was pretty close to 19 points and 9 rebounds in his first year with Boston. After that, he was hanging around 15 points and 14 points and about 7 or 8 rebounds. But it's not even just his stats, it's that he looked so much different. In that first year with Boston, he was still very athletic, very avid defender. He could do so much to impact that team. When he came back, he was a lot more timid. He was definitely not the athletic beast he always was, and it seemed like he kind of saved a lot of energy for the playoffs. And that's where I begin to ask what if, because I started to think, well, what if Kevin Garnett had not have had that knee injury and he never really had to save himself anymore? What would those last years in Boston have looked like, and would the big three have ever actually breaking up the way they did? Much like with Kobe and Shaq, I start to think that our window to win championships was much larger had Kevin Garnett had not been slowed by that injury, and his stats tell a pretty interesting story to back up why I believe this. So if you look at his playoff stats when we won the NBA championship, he had went to about 20 points and 11 rebounds. But it's pretty interesting. Do any of y'all remember in 2011-2012 when we almost beat the Miami Heat to make the finals? Nobody thought we were even getting close to the finals that year, yet we were 1 game away. And that season, that playoff season, Kevin Garnett upped his averages to 19 and 10. The man was 35 years old then. But if you take a look at his regular season stats back then, he was averaging 15 points and 8 rebounds. So when you look at the stats and you remember him watching him play post-injury, you could really see that he started to save a lot of his really greatest basketball for the NBA playoffs. That really has to cause you to think, what if Kevin Garnett only had to make adjustments to his game and not because it was due to an injury, because the injury no doubt slowed him down. Had Kevin Garnett not had that injury, we would have probably still seen Boston versus Miami, because I think that would have gave LeBron James even more incentive to go get, make that super team over there. And we would have been able to see a healthier Kevin Garnett and a more spry Kevin Garnett against the Miami Heat in the 2011 season and the 2012 season. Now, they did get really good, so I'm not going to say we would have beat them both years, but if we would have beat them both years, we could have seen some really cool matchups like the Boston Celtics versus the Dallas Mavericks in the finals, which would have given us an awesome matchup at the power forward with Kevin Garnett and Dirk Nowitzki. We could have also seen us play against the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I'm not even going to lie, that year I didn't even want to play OKC because I just thought they were way too young and fast for us, but again, with a healthier Kevin Garnett, that could have been a cool matchup. I don't want to push it into 2013 because again, Father Time is undefeated, and by that time Kevin Garnett was 36 years old. But check this out, if Kevin Garnett doesn't get injured, does Ray Allen end up leaving us to go to the Miami Heat? Because you look at it, Ray Allen pretty much left. One reason was because we tried to trade him, and of course then we lost to the Miami Heat, which I don't think he would have left if we hadn't lost to them. But if you think back, us trying to trade Ray Allen had a lot to do with Kevin Garnett anyways, because we needed a younger piece. Kevin Garnett wasn't what he was. The whole Celtics team was getting older, so we started to think, hey, let's trade Ray Allen for someone like an OJ Mayo. Let's try to get a younger player in here. However, if Kevin Garnett is still there at his best, that takes a lot of pressure off of Allen and Pierce, and they play better together as a unit. This big three probably survives the 2013 year, and Miami doesn't get a hold of Ray Allen. So who knows, maybe we do make the finals that year. I doubt it, because I think at some point Miami would have probably found a piece and been able to beat us. But it's just fun to think what if, because we don't really know and we have nothing to go off of. And maybe we would have seen Kevin Garnett versus Tim Duncan also. So to wrap this whole thing up, Kevin Garnett's knee injury didn't just rob the Celtics of more legitimate title contention, it definitely probably robbed us of at least a matchup with Kevin Garnett and Dirk Nowitzki, and possibly a matchup with KG and Tim Duncan in the NBA Finals. Both legends are retired now. Dirk Nowitzki is the last one, so we're never ever going to see that, but who knows, those kind of matchups really could have been in the cards if there was no injuries. Number 1, Derrick Rose's prime. This is a story that as an NBA fan, I pretty much convinced myself I'm never going to get over. It seems like just yesterday that I was getting ready to graduate high school, and I was constantly checking news sources trying to see if Derrick Rose was finally going to make his return that night. Back then it wasn't such a big deal because he had only missed a year, and I started to think, you know what, he was doing some pretty crazy stuff the year before. I want to see him at full strength after this torn ACL, and I was convinced that he was going to come back and we were going to put this behind us. He was going to be a Cinderella story, and it was just going to all be good. Fast forward the clock about 3 or 4 years later, here I am about to graduate college, still waiting for the return of the MVP form of Derrick Rose, and now I'm starting to believe maybe I shouldn't wait anymore, because the harsh reality is it's probably not coming back. Now, if you did not get to see the 2011 version of Rose, I'm sorry to tell you, but you missed one of the most special things in NBA history. First of all, let's look at the improvement he brought to the Chicago Bulls. The season before he won MVP, they were 41-41, and they finished as an A seed, which means they had to play Cleveland in the first round, and of course they were eliminated. That summer, Derrick Rose came and told everybody, he was like, well, why can't I be the MVP of the league? To which most of us responded, well, your team isn't going to win enough, you're not at an MVP level yet. He came out and proved everybody wrong. Not only did he become the youngest MVP in NBA history, but he turned that Chicago Bulls team around and led them to a record of 62-20 next year. That's a 21-game improvement, got them a first seed in the East, and the craziest thing about that, this was the year that the Miami Heat added LeBron James and Chris Bosh to the roster. Everyone was so infatuated with that we all fully expected them to be first seed, yet the Chicago Bulls team that was pretty much nobody's last year, they were just a developing middle of the pack team, they were contenders the next year. That Bulls roster was very good defensively, but Derrick Rose was pretty much the life to that offense with what he could do with the assist and scoring, because they did not have a second player that could just create with the ball. You just give them the ball and say, go get us some baskets. Derrick Rose was the only guy like that. You had Luol Deng and Carlos Boozer who put up pretty good averages, but they weren't like superstars of the league. He did not have a second superstar when he did all this, when the fact is that most people did. Rose was able to go put up 25 points and nearly 8 assists that season, but what's even more amazing than his stats is just what he really did if you just sat down and watched him. Just don't even count any stats for the game. When you look at how Derrick Rose moved and what he did on the basketball court, it was simply one of the greatest things I've ever seen. At the point guard position, you never see a player like him that can move as fast as him. That's the acrobat that he was. That was the athlete that he was. But the craziest thing is he kept it all in control. So one of the knocks on Westbrook that you see these days is, yeah, he's just dynamite. He's an athletic dynamite basically, but people get on him for being reckless sometimes, you know, going and taking layups off the wrong foot and making poor decisions. Derrick Rose was able to do pretty much the same things Westbrook does, but he was able to keep it more in control. Now, whoever you think is more athletic, that's a different conversation. Whichever prime version, that's not this conversation. The point I'm trying to make is that the type of athletic ability he showed on the court with the touch that he added on to it is just something I've never really seen before. I'm gonna tell you guys something I'm never gonna forget about Derrick Rose. It was a cold night in January. I was in the 11th grade and I had just got back from a high school football game. Standing in my living room, I turned on the Celtics game, or what was left of it, because I knew they were playing the Bulls that night and we were losing pretty badly. And I'll never forget, shortly after I turned the TV on, I see Derrick Rose drive down the middle and he did one of the most crazy, controlled, contested layups I've ever seen in my life. This guy drives in between Kevin Garnett and Brandon Bass. He cuffs the ball. He uses his body to bump both of them off. While I can't even really describe what he did, honestly. He did some crazy shit where he turned around and did a reverse layup, contested between two big men. I don't even know if he could see the basket when he did this, but when you were watching Derrick Rose in 2011, this was the kind of stuff that was common, and this is what you could expect from him. The year's now 2016 going on 2017, he really hasn't played like this since then, so we can effectively say that we've been robbed of most of, if not all of his prime. And it's hard not to think about that 2011 version of Rose. He was still only 22 years old back then. He was probably going to improve. He couldn't shoot threes that well back then. He didn't have a great shot back then. What if he added a jump shot onto what he was already doing, and he could still do the things going to the basket like he could, his court vision? Man, what would that have been like? And you start to think he would still obviously be a Chicago Bull today. Who would they have got to help Derrick Rose? Because even without injuries that year, I don't know if they were going to beat the Miami Heat in 2012. But from watching that Chicago Bulls team, you always got the sense that they were just one player away from being serious, pretty much championship winners. If Derrick Rose had been able to play with like a Dwayne Wade type player or Dwight Howard back then, just another superstar, it would have been over. There would have been no way you could guard Derrick Rose and another superstar on the same floor. But who would have thought back then in 2011 that was, or I believe it was actually 2012 when he made his last All-Star team, who would have thought this bustling MVP was the last time he was going to make an All-Star team? Still don't know if he's going to make one today. The biggest place I believe this hurts in is the conference disparity, because most people believe that the East has a lack of true superstars, and Derrick Rose was an MVP type player back then. So you think about all the battles we could see with him and LeBron James since in the last, 5-6 years, all those battles we could have seen in the playoffs. I wish the best for Derrick Rose. I'm still going to watch all his games on League Pass. I'm still going to try to, see what he does, and I'm still going to flinch up every time he goes for a layup, because I don't want to see this man get hurt anymore. It's been one of the worst stories I've seen in NBA history. But the good thing, and one thing I can give him props for, is that he's still playing, and he's still a pretty good point guard. He's just nowhere near close what we used to believe. But when you look at the numbers he put up after last All-Star break, and physically even, he's not terrible. And that's the thing, most players become terrible has-beens on, the third string of somebody's team, or second string, or just bench warmers, and that has yet to happen to Derrick Rose. So we wish Derrick Rose the best, but as of right now, he is definitely one of my biggest what-if scenarios in NBA history. So anyways, this video went a little bit longer than I thought it would. I get caught up when I reminisce, especially about the Celtics of D Rose. What do you like to think about when you think about what if in the NBA as far as injuries or trades? You can leave those in the comment section. If my internet doesn't go out, I will be reading those throughout the hurricane, and it probably will. So stay safe out there if you're in Florida with me. I'm going to go back to playing Dodge the Hurricane now. I'll see you guys on the next video, hopefully.